An ILC podcast.
How well do you really know your grandparents, their stories, their life experiences?
We are here with students from the Independent Learning Center who engaged in design thinking to solve problems in our community. This is part of a series on combating social isolation.
During the pandemic, all of us have been isolated, and as young students, we wanted to connect with the elders in a meaningful way. We wanted to hear their stories.
Okay, so we are here at the ILC with Caitlin, Isla, and Lucy, and we are here to talk with Frauke Rynd. And so, yeah, let's get started.
Okay, first question is, where and when were you born?
Okay, I was born in Shanghai, China, and in 1945, so you can do the math a little later. So 1945, I don't know how much world history you've all had, but China, that was the year the war, World War II ended. My father died of typhoid about 6 months after I was born, and we were still in China, and my mother was German, as was my father, and her family and friends in Germany said, don't come back to Germany, because Germany had been devastated by the war. And so she decided to stay. I'll just do a real quick history overview. She decided to stay, and she met my stepfather, who was a Dutchman, and he was in China. So Shanghai and many parts of China were, the Japanese had taken over and were there. During the war years, anybody who wasn't part of the Axis, Germany, Italy, Japan, a couple of other countries, were interned or killed or sent away. My stepfather had been interned during the war, and he was from Holland. He stayed in China. They met, fell in love. From 1945 to 1949, China was in a huge civil war. And in 49, Mao Zedong took over, and it was communist rule then. And my parents, as well as any other Europeans, most Europeans left because they didn't want to stay. And so my parents decided they really wanted to come to America. They didn't know anybody. They didn't have any proper papers, but we were able to get on a ship, an American ship that took us to San Francisco. And we got off the boat with a few pieces of luggage, and we were like illegal immigrants for the next 4 years. And we moved around a lot. I don't remember a lot of that time. I was 5 when we left. And anyway, we moved so much, and I'm sure it was very traumatic, but when you're a kid, you kind of brush those things over and persevere.
Why were you in China? Or why were your parents in China?
Well, my mother was a journalist, and she had left Germany in the late 30s and wanted to go to, she was working in Berlin for a newspaper and a magazine, and she asked her boss to send her to the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. And her boss said, her name was Dagmar, and she had beautiful long blonde hair, and she was very spunky, and and smart and independent. And he said, Dagmar, you're just going to fall in love with some diplomat and you'll give up your career. So I'm not going to send you there. Well, she saved her money and made her way there, and started writing stories and sent them back to her publisher, and they put her back on the payroll. So.
Cheers to that. Nice.
Yeah.
Second question, where did you live for most of your childhood?
So I lived the first 5 years in China, in Shanghai, and then for 3 years we lived in the Bay Area of California, where we moved around a lot. And I know we went to school because but I don't remember any of the schools. But a couple of times I remember getting off the school bus, and my mom was there to pick us up because the immigration people were on her, or on my family, on her, and the whole. So then we wouldn't go back to that school. Like,
Wow.
we eventually came up north because they had hoped to get into Canada, and so we came up north, and but we couldn't get into Canada because both United States and Canada had a quota system for Europeans, and if you didn't have any special status, refugee status or other, they'd already run out of the quota. But we came back to Seattle, so then for the next rest of my life mostly, except for the last 30 years, I spent in Seattle. Grew up there, went to high school there, and yeah, went to university. And
Third question, what is your favorite memory from your childhood and why?
yeah, I was really shy and timid, and I don't have a lot of, I don't know. We had some property out in Issaquah, outskirts, and now it's a big town in Washington. But and we had a garden out there, and I do remember liking that and having it. And it was totally black. I saw Sputnik, the first the Russian, what were they called? Spaceship. And we could see it out there really clearly. Now you see spaceship, you see all kinds of, flying things in space all the time, including Teslas.
Flying Teslas.
Yeah.
What is a hardship you dealt with growing up?
Well, we were very, I wouldn't say poor, but we certainly didn't have any extra money. Both my mom and dad got jobs that were, my father got a job with Standard Oil, so he was pumping gas, and then he had another job selling Oriental carpets, and my mom worked at, she had a lot of office jobs. And it was interesting, after she died, I found a lot of her papers, but I found articles that she wrote. She was a writer at heart, that was her art, her creativity. So she wrote a lot of articles and sent them out to people. And I find the story as well as the rejection letter from whomever she was sending it to. It was a very hard time for my parents. And it was not, it was work. My sister and I did all the house chores. We all got jobs my first job was when I was 13, and prior to that I probably did babysitting jobs, but had a job, doing other things. And so it wasn't, a easygoing childhood. My stepfather died when I was 14, so then my mom really had a lot more hard times. So,
Wow.
but it was, I don't know, I love the resiliency of children of all ages. And I don't know if you can how you develop that. I think we all start out with that, and then different things can turn that around. But yeah, I've always been a pretty easygoing, positive person, I think. I laugh a lot.
What career did you have and what made you choose them?
Okay, wow, I've had a lot. Never one path, I just diverged a lot. And a lot of it wasn't by choice so much as by what was available. So I probably had at least jobs. I was a legal secretary for quite a while. I was a dental assistant for a few years. My first job was selling bait, herring, at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning down in Ilwaco in southwestern Washington. And then working in a charter fish office. Very eclectic. I taught ESL for a while to adults mostly from Southeast Asia. And then I worked in a bookstore. I think there were some other things in there too.
Who in your life influenced you the most and why?
I think probably my mother, because she too was very strong. When my stepfather died, she became an alcoholic. And life was really just too much for her to handle. And she smoked a lot. Everybody smoked back then. So a couple of times my sisters and I did our own little intervention. And the first time was when she was smoking. And I think we came home from high school one day and they were just doing these studies about secondhand smoke. And we said, Mom, you've got to stop smoking. And she had tried to stop. And we just said, you're not only just killing yourself, you're probably killing us. And we didn't say it like that, we were younger. And she stopped smoking, just like that.
Wow.
And never had another cigarette. And then after she'd been drinking, for quite a few years, and she didn't like drink every day, but she was what I would call a weekend alcoholic. And she'd come home from work and just start drinking. She was not a happy drunk. She was just really mean. I think she just thought about how awful her life was compared to when she was younger, and she just... So anyway, we did a second intervention, and we just said again, we can't watch you do this. You're ruining your relationship with us. And it really taught me how much she loved us. And she stopped drinking.
Wow.
That says a lot.
It says a lot. So she was incredibly strong. And when Mac and I got married, you and Kim know Mac, we had this big outdoor wedding. And I knew my mother was a wonderful toast mistress. She loved to give toasts and celebrations and parties. And I knew that she would want to do that. She would want to give us a toast. And I knew she would do it with champagne. And I knew that if she had one glass, she'd stopped drinking like at least 15 years earlier. I knew if she had one glass, she wouldn't be able to stop. And I knew how awful it was going to be if I saw her get drunk. So I called these husbands of a couple, like 3 different husbands of dear friends of mine. And I said, okay, this is what's going to happen. They all knew my mom. I said, I want you to protect me, because I didn't want my day to be ruined. And she did all those things. She was a happy drunk then, but and they did. They protected me, and I said, if you see her coming too close to me after she's had a few drinks, you just kind of guide her away, and she'll be happy to see you.
I thought you were going to say you gave him fake champagne or something.
Oh, no, she would know. And then she didn't drink again. I mean, she was amazing.
Wow.
So I would say she probably had the most influence on me.
Yeah.
Her adventure, she was such an adventurer. She loved to travel, and I loved to travel. And she did her last trip, I think, when she was 80, and she went to South Africa to see a friend of hers that she met in China, who had been her maid of honor, and she went, and they hadn't seen each other for, I don't know, 50, 60 years. And her friend was quite a racist. And my mother got into a couple of fights with her about the way she treated her, because everybody in South Africa and South and Southern Africa had help, and her friend just treated them terribly and spoke badly about them, and my mother called her on it, and then she left.
Oh, no.
I know.
For her.
And she'd made she'd gone 3,000 miles away to see her friend.
But she didn't know that, or?
She didn't know that about her, no.
Oh. Man.
But,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so what world events had the biggest impact on you, and why?
Good question. I would say, the civil rights movement in the early 60s and leading up to Martin Luther King's death. Certainly Kennedy's death had a huge impact, but for me, Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King's death were much more impactful. And when I was in college, I started doing sit-ins. Back then, there weren't so many marches on the West Coast, but we did a lot of sit-ins. And we would just go to the county courthouse, or the county courthouse, or the Superior State Courthouse, and sit and sing songs and call for more social justice. This was in the early 60s. And then when I was in New York, I participated in those too. So I'd say historically the civil rights movement was very important to me. It continues to be very important to me. Social justice is very important.
Okay, so how has the world changed since you were born in terms of culture and economy and politics and sort of what happens in the world?
Well, certainly technology, which I think for the most part is great. I'm still pretty slow at some of the things that I'm learning, and I'm open to learning. I have friends who say, I don't want to have a cell phone, I don't want to have a computer. It's, oh my God, it opens up the world to you. I think socially we're more divided, and politically, and people, I don't know, I've read a lot of essays saying that we were just as divided in the 60s, but I don't think so. I think there's more anger and hatred now than there was. And, in the 60s and 70s, you wouldn't talk about race. People would just, or where they lived. There were red lines, there were other things, but it wasn't. I never felt the anger and the hatred that people have now. Both sides, all sides. Like there's a lot more intolerance.
Do you think there's any way to change that?
I think it has to start at a really early age. I think, if you can get children, expose children to all different things, all different people, all different ideas without the baggage that parents bring to it. It's like, got to scoop them up and get them outside. I think being outside helps. I think a lot of people so cooped up and don't, they have their regimen, and then a lot of television is thrown in there, and if their parents only, whatever leanings parents have, they see one or the other side, and that's all they hear and see, then they're going to start feeling that way and thinking that way. Mm-hmm. I think it seems like more people are talking about social consciousness and just the simple idea of kindness, and I think that's being introduced into schools all over, I hope, not just in our little valley. But, you know, and how that little step of reaching out to another person, of someone different from you, and expressing empathy or understanding or making eye contact with them. Our grandkids are always giving us a bad time because, well, especially Mac, because he's like the friendliest man in the world. And we'll talk to everybody. And it's great, you know, and it's somewhat irritating for them because he seemingly pays more attention to the stranger on the road than he does to them. Opa, they will say. But, you know, it's reaching out to people that you don't know is huge. And just acknowledging them, people, you know, in the grocery store. I mean, I have friends who've been here for 20 years. They have no idea who their plumber is, you know, or the name or the background. Or our repairman, Kevin, he's fabulous, you know. And if you didn't talk to him and find out, oh, he's got a son and, you know, he's got these issues and this issues, but he's a great person. And so many people, I think, look at tradespeople kind of with denigration, and not saying, "Oh, yeah, he's a great technician. He's a great plumber. He's a great welder." And we all have to. I think it can change with that. I think it can change with respect.
How has technology affected your life?
I'd say positively for the most part. You can find out anything in a moment. Solves a lot of arguments. No, that wasn't that person. Right? How many scores did happen? You know, blah, blah, blah. But I think it can also take too much time away from just picking up a book and reading it. We have a television, but we don't have TV reception here, so we don't, you know, we watch the news on our computer. But you know, there's a lot of good television. There's a lot of great movies. I mean, I think that I'm not against technology. I'm trying to think of the other areas of technology. I don't like Facebook. I just except to see my kids' photographs and my grandchildren and others. I mean, the whole valley, you know. But I decided I probably won't leave. I was going to leave just because I hate what Zuckerberg has done. But I'll just watch. But I don't want to respond at all. So if you don't hear from me, it's because I should probably just say I'm going to continue looking at photos, but don't expect happy birthdays or, you know, that. And it's such a time suck. It just irritates me when I go and look at it and I spend a half an hour. All of a sudden, half an hour is gone, and I could have been reading.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
What inventions most amazed you?
Well, computers are pretty amazing. And iPhones, you know, or phones, electronic phones, and what other technology? I mean, I think electric cars are amazing. And solar power, I think, is amazing, and it's so simple. You know, and we could be bringing it to so many places around the world, places that need it to solve, you know, electrical problem, electricity, bring electricity to people in Africa and South America that don't have it, you know, and they have the sun, you know, it's not that expensive anymore.
What is something you wish would happen to make the world a better place?
I think it would be great if everybody, every country in the world got rid of their military. And there wouldn't be this competition for building the best missiles and the nuclear warheads. We would learn to work with our so-called competitors and enemies, and everybody could just let that go. I mean, it's, and just use all that money for things that are really needed in the whole world, not just here. We have a lot of things that we could use that money for. And but yeah, if we could just get rid of all of our guns, especially here in the United States. I mean, we have more deaths by guns.
Okay, so what are important lessons you've learned in your life?
Just to be kind, to be tolerant, to really accept people for who they are. Even, you're always going to have people you don't like, and that's fine. You can't like everybody because of personalities, because of past hurts. I think it's really important to forgive people, because I think if you hang on to your anger, it's just a really bad thing. So I think I've learned that. I had a really hard childhood, and I feel like I've forgiven especially my stepdad, because I just understand how difficult it was for him. Especially, it was very hard for my mother too. But many of us are very lucky to have parents who love you unconditionally. And I think because I didn't get that, I've learned to give it. And I just feel so lucky that I've had, my children, and I have been able to express that and to be tolerant of their friends and their foibles. We all have our own foibles, and we have to forgive it, even I wouldn't say even if it's a heinous crime, but at least to be able to move on yourself without anger. I think that's really important. Getting emotional here.
It's a deep question.
It is.
Yeah.
It's okay.
What advice would you give to the younger generation?
Similar thing.
Uh-huh.
Similar, yeah.
Oh, be happy. And that's easy to say. Find things that will make you feel good. And find people that, encourage you, of all ages. People who accept you. People who tolerate you. Get outside. I didn't grow up spending a lot of time outside, but my growing up years. But once I became an adult and found my first true love and just got introduced to wilderness. And if you can, I would encourage everybody to be able to spend time outdoors. I'd say learn to be by yourself. Learn to be, and not just independent, but to be comfortable with yourself. And spend time, it's always good to take a walk with a friend or a parent or a dog, but just to be able to, say, wander around with your thoughts and carry a journal with you and I'm feeling this or da-da-da. I think writing is really important too. Doesn't have to be great writing. It's just writing your thoughts and writing your feelings, and then looking back at them afterwards. As you get older. Oh wow, I felt that then. I feel the same way now. Because a lot of who we are is there, at an early age, and then as you grow older, you get to discover it, which is always fun.
How do you want to be remembered?
Somebody who laughed a lot. I have to say a little bit about soccer.
Oh yeah, please do.
Okay, because I didn't touch on that. So when I was 29, I had 2 kids, and my first husband passed away. I was very strong and resilient, just because I had to be, because I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. On a cold winter evening, a friend called. She said, "Frauke, you're German. You must know how to play soccer." And I said, "I don't know how to play soccer." And she said, "Well, we're having a practice tonight. Come on out." And I went out, and it was a rainy night in Seattle, and ran around crazy. None of us knew what we were doing, chasing this silly ball. And and I came home higher than the kites. I just absolutely loved it. So we formed a team. It was in 1975. And it was the first year that women's teams were organized in Seattle. There were kids playing, but no, and I think men had their teams, but no women's teams. And so there were about 6 teams that first year. And I played for the next 15 years. I stopped playing when I was 45. And every time I went out, it was like the best high I have ever had. I had so much fun for those 15 years. And I think part of it was realizing that I could be strong. I could be physical, where I'd never been physical before. And then I realized that I really loved to run. So I started running. I ran 1 marathon, and I ran lots of smaller 10K races, and just loving it. Not feeling I was competitive when I played soccer, but not when I was running. I just ran because I absolutely loved it. And I think if you can find something like that, and it doesn't have to be a sport necessarily, but something that brings you that physicality as well as exploring the intellectual parts of your life, is really important. And I taught soccer. I coached and I refereed too. And that, if you play soccer, you'll see me on the sideline. I try not to yell anymore. Can't help myself. Yep.
Wow.
Do you have any last words of wisdom?
No, I'm really happy that you asked me to do this. It's quite an honor.
You've been listening to an ILC podcast with Isla,
Lucy, Georgie,
Kim?
Willow, Caitlin.
And Bella.
Thanks for joining us.